Today is September 22nd, 2009. We're with the Jewish Historical Society of Western Massachusetts. We're here at the Jewish Community Center in Springfield at the conclusion of a meeting of the Jewish war veterans of
Post-26.
Post-26.
Right.
Springfield Freedman Post. Jewish
Springfield Freedman Post. Please tell us your name and
Rank.
and your rank.
Mickey Temkin, and I was born in Springfield, and I got in the Army on May 22nd, 1942, and I got out in February 1946. And for 2 years I was stationed in Camp Lee, Virginia, Quartermaster Corps, and then I was shipped overseas to the PGC, the Persian Gulf Command. And we had 30,000 soldiers located in that area. And the reason we were there, or the Americans were there, because we had the Lend-Lease program was in effect, and America sent a lot of weapons and tools and help to Russia through Iran, Abadan, southern part of Iran. That's where I was stationed, and we drove up to the Russian border and supplied the Russians with all these weapons, and it shortened the war by quite a lot. It did, and I was there for almost 2 years in Iran.
How old were you when you enlisted or were drafted?
22.
And where in Springfield were you living at that point?
The north end of Springfield.
What was your street address?
Massasoit Street. Does that ring a bell?
Definitely.
Yeah, I was there in Massasoit. And my brother was enlisted, and he was stationed in Paris, France. And he's two years younger than I was. Yeah.
What did your parents do for a living in the North End?
Well, my father was in the wholesale candy business in the North End. He had his own store, and he used to have customers that would purchase candy and variety. He also knew how to fix pinball games, so he had those in the stores there too, where he would. Things were kind of tough in the 30s, and I remember my mother used to get paid in pennies and nickels for the salary because things were so rough. They get it from the pinball games. That's all.
When you were discharged from the military, did you come back to the North End?
I did, and then I stayed there for about 6 years, and then I moved to the Forest Park section of Springfield.
And what was what was the street address?
In Forest Park.
No, in the North End.
Oh, Chestnut Street, 568 Chestnut Street, right across from the Beth Israel Synagogue. Have you heard of that?
Definitely. Oh yeah.
And the one on in Massasoit, what number was that?
149.
And when you moved to Forest Park, the address was?
42 Hiawatha Street. That's near Sumner Avenue and Whittier Street in that area.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. Corporal Technician.
T5.
T5.
Okay. What is your name?
My name is Oscar Selden. I was born in Holyoke, Mass. And at the age of 4, we moved to Chicopee, Willimantic section, where I lived there for 25 years or thereabouts. And at the beginning of the war, I decided to enlist back in 42 in January. And because I had a hernia, they gave me a 6-month leeway, and they will notify me when to come back. So in 6 months to the day, I got my notice and got inducted and ended up at Fort Devens and then shipped down to St. Petersburg, Florida for basic training. And that basic training, we were told we will be in the Air Corps Medical Department, and everybody groaned. Their impression of medical department to go out into the places of activity, you know. Okay. At that particular time, the Air Force, or it was called the Air Corps at that time, had a lot of casualties in Europe, and they didn't have facilities in the small hospitals they had there. They were desperately in need of medical laboratory technicians and they were not available for love or money in the States, no matter what your rank or your, so they decided after a while, see if they could get it, recruits from the rank and file of the Air Corps. So they had a very elaborate examination, took 2 days, and over $1.25 million of the Air Corps personnel took the exam. And out of the $1.25 million, they picked 50. And I was one of the 50.
And where were you then sent?
That was, I was sent to Chamblee, Georgia, where they had Lawson General Hospital, which is similar to Tufts. It was a teaching hospital for Army personnel and also armed forces. And there we were told that we were going to become laboratory technicians, and we were going to give a very comprehensive test or a course in all aspects, and it's going to be a 2-year course. But we are expected to be finished in 90 days. They give us 90 days to do it.
Uh-huh.
And one of the fellows has the temerity to say, what if we flunk? We will ship you immediately to the front. So there's no more questions. And so after the 90 days, our 50 were scattered all over bases in the Air Force in this country. I landed in Orlando, Florida, and assigned to the medical lab there at the Station Hospital. In 2 weeks, I assisted in my first autopsy. And that was the beginning of my career as a medical technician. And then a lot of things happened there. And after 2 years, I decided to change my occupation. I managed to do it, and I became into the hospital administration department. And after being in that section, I was transferred to eventually to Louisiana Barksdale Field, and I became the chief non-com in charge of hospital administration admissions. And I spent the rest of my career at Barksdale Field.
When were you discharged?
In 1945.
And when you were discharged, where did you go to?
What rank?
What rank were you?
Sergeant technician, 4th grade. He was 5th grade.
And where did you go after you were discharged?
After the discharge, I came home.
To Chicopee?
Yes. My folks lived there.
Willimantic, huh?
In Willimantic, so that section of Chicopee.
Uh-huh.
And I went on the road as a salesman, which I was doing when I got out of high school at age 16.
And did you spend the rest of your time now in Chicopee, or did you move into Springfield?
I moved into Springfield when I got married in '46.
And what part of Springfield did you move into?
In the North End,
What street did you move to?
Maryland.
No, that's
excuse me.
Forest Park.
The
Maryland.
exact street address.
40 Bancroft Street
Oh, yes.
in Springfield.
Know that.
You know it. It's no longer existed, that
Yes,
building.
Oh, the building, it was in the block then, huh?
It was like Mo Newman owned the
Yes.
4-story building.
Right.
Okay.
Final rank?
Any way you want to tell us.
I'll tell it to you in the end. Ted Nee, I was born in the Bronx, New York, went to school there, got as far as college, went to City College for 2 years, and then I enlisted in Merchant Marine. That was in the summer of 1943.
How old were you?
I was 18 and went down to Mississippi, to Pass Christian, Mississippi for 6 months of training. After that, we got assigned to a ship In my case, it was a troop ship. In fact, it was Santa Maria, one of Columbus's named ships. And I sailed, we picked up soldiers all up and down the East Coast, from Virginia, Baltimore, New York, and brought them to North Africa and Naples, Italy, when the war was on there. And other trips were to England and Scotland. Then when it was pretty near the end of the war, when I went back to training, additional training, officers training at the United States Merchant Marine Academy out at Kings Point, and I was there till 1947, and I graduated as an ensign in the United States Naval Reserve and a third engineer in the Maritime Service. So I sailed after the war with different companies. United Fruit Company, for one. I was carrying bananas at that time on our ship. Eventually I quit sailing and went back to school. My mother was after me all the time. She said, "Don't be a bum at the sea. Go out, go back to school." So a friend of mine was getting married and he needed somebody to be best man. So I had to wait around till he got married, and so my mother said, "Well, while you're waiting, why don't you go back to school?" So I did. I went back to school and finished. I had 2 more years, got a degree in chemical engineering, and eventually I worked for DuPont in New Jersey for several years, and then moved up to Springfield in 1954. I went to work for Monsanto. I had gotten married by that time. I got married in 1953. And then I spent time at Monsanto until I retired. But I've never lived here before 1954 when I moved up to take a job.
Where did you live in Springfield when you moved here? What was your street address?
Our first address was an apartment. It was 88 Gateway Drive. It's presently now dorms for Western New England College on Wilbraham Road. And then we bought a house up the street. It was 164 Lumay Street. We're still living there.
And what section of town is that?
It's called 16 Acres section.
Uh-huh. Was that a Jewish neighborhood at all?
No, I wouldn't think so.
So that didn't factor into your where you picked the place to live?
No.
No, it was the suburbs.
Yeah, it was the burbs.
Okay, we'll come back. We'll continue.
Yeah.
Okay. Give us your name and your rank.
Okay, Shirley Hirsch, U.S. Navy, 3rd class petty officer. I enlisted, enlisted in 1945, and I was 20 years old, and at that time you weren't allowed to go in the service, not unless your parents agreed, which my mother did and got my father to do it finally. So I did go in the service when I was 20. I was only in 13 months, but I had a wonderful time. I trained at boot camp at Hunter College.
Mm.
From there, they shipped me to Clinton, Oklahoma. Very small, near Oklahoma City. And I stayed there for about 6 months, and then they shipped me to Corpus Christi, Texas, the biggest naval air station in the country. And I ended up working in the personnel office, separation center. And I stayed there. I was supposed to go on to California. They were going to ship me down there to be 1st class petty officer. But my mother and father needed me home, so I came back home. My daughter did. So I loved the Navy, would have made it a career, but things happen the way it is.
Where was home?
Home was in the North End on 25 Linden Street, and the Sacred Heart Church was there, and around the corner on Chestnut Street was my parents' shop, Kesser Israel, which the whole family ran. That was it. and that we were just right around the corner since I was a little girl. The only time I left Springfield is I moved to Chicopee on Linden Street. I don't know the number, let's say it's 35, and I was there with my husband for 6 years, who incidentally was in the Navy for 4 years. I met him when I came back home after a veterans meeting. And we would have been married 60 years come the end of October, but he's gone now. He's gone, passed away. It'll be almost 5 years in November. And he served in South Pacific. I just want you to know that.
What was his name?
Leonard Hirsch. And he
Is
was
he a local boy?
Yes, he lived on Massasoit Street all his life. He
Not
knew
too
him.
far from me.
Yeah,
Did you know him?
Very well.
Yes,
I knew
yes.
his parents too.
yeah. And I never knew him growing up, but he lived next to my aunt and uncle. I probably played with him, but I never, when I was a kid, we played some boys.
He lived
so-
across from the Jewish home in Springfield at that time, the first Jewish home. Yeah.
So
When did your family leave the North End?
my mother and father never left the North End. They went from Linden Street on the 4th floor, and they moved down on Grosvenor Street. There's a Grosvenor Street,
Grosvenor,
yeah, and
Grosvenor.
my mother and father lived there with my kid brother, and I moved, and of course I have a big family, but you want to go into that. But anyways, I moved to Linden Street on the 4th floor, never got off the 4th floor for 6 years, and then I moved where Ted lives, 16 acres, but I'm across the street from the Western New England Colleges on Bradley Road. I'm on Kirk Drive, so very close. My son graduated from there, one of them. So, yeah, and I love the Navy, I'll tell you that much.
Thank you.
And also, one other thing, in the Navy, I worked in the post office. I ended up, it was a career, I just celebrated my 25th retirement from the post office September 6th. So I learned an awful lot in the Navy.
My name is Irving Gold. I was a PFC in the Army. I was drafted in July of 1943, and I went to Fort McClellan for my basic.
How old were you?
I was 18. And from there, I went to ASTP at Manhattan College, and I left there and went to the Signal Corps at Fort Monmouth. I became a radio operator. After that, we got transferred out to Missouri, to a base there. Then we went overseas from there with the 80th Division. When I got over to Europe, we were in France, and then the Battle of the Bulge started up north. And I got shipped up north to the 3rd Army, ended up in the 70th Division. And I joined our division the day after they had gone into Bastogne and broke the battle when the Germans were surrounded it. After that, I fought through the war and finally came home on my birthday, February 9th of 1946. I was discharged, and I went up to University of Mass to become a chicken farmer, because my father had bought a chicken farm in East Long Meadow. And I met my wife up there. She was there as a veteran also. And we've been living on Parker Street for 60-odd years in East Long Meadow.
Is that the site of the farm?
Yeah, it was the farm, not anymore.
So you were a chicken farmer, that was your life, what you did?
Basically, yeah.
Where did you grow up?
In Springfield. I was born on Ferry Street.
No. Address?
Pardon me?
What number?
80, I think it was.
See, that's a good memory.
And then my dad moved his grocery store up to the X, and we lived at 382 Dickinson Street. And then, well, they sold the business in 45, and they went after the war. They had bought this farm out on Parker Street in East Long Meadow,
What was the name of the grocery store?
Gold's Creamery.
Gold's Creamery. Were there many Jews out in East Long Meadow when you moved there?
I think there was maybe 3 or 4 at the time.
Did you know you were Jewish? Did your neighbors let you know?
I didn't have any neighbors because when we moved out there, it was practically empty.
Okay.
I'm Sadie Gold, and I ended up as corporal in the U.S. Army Air Force. I was working at City Hall in Chelsea, and I decided I'd like to enter the service, and my mother didn't object. My father was gone by then, and I was sent after basic training. I went to the West Coast and near San Francisco, Fairfield Suisun Army Air Base, and it was there that I spent 2 years, I think from 42 to 44 approximately.
How old were you when you joined in 42?
Oh, about 22 or so. And I did clerical work. I freed a soldier for active duty. He wasn't crazy about me, for sure. But I did clerical work mainly. And when I was discharged, the government had a program where they would support you if you went to the university. So I did. Went to University of Mass. I was studying olericulture, which is vegetable growing, thinking I would go to Israel. That was my plan. But I met Irving at a Jewish services on Sunday morning. They had Jewish services. And not too long after, I got married and went to the farm on Parker Street.
Did you use your skills in agriculture on the farm?
No, I didn't have enough studies for then. I got married soon. I didn't quite complete my education. But we do plant a little now.
And did you become a chicken farmer too?
I was a farmer's wife. We had a store, and people would come in, drive in and sell eggs and chickens and so forth.
And in terms of the high holidays, did people come to get chickens for Kaporet?
Yes, we used to have Cantor Abramson come out and shechet the chickens, especially for us, the shechet. He did shechet them. And what other, anything special? Not really. Then we had some non-Jewish killing of chickens as well.
Thank you.
My name is Harry Eisenstadt. I left when I was discharged. I was discharged as a T3, and then subsequently when I returned to the military in 1950 for the Korean War, I came out a Master Sergeant. I was drafted as of December 1942. I was working at the Springfield Armory in the Procurement Division. I was shipped out to Camp Pickett, Virginia, which was an MRTC, Medical Replacement Training Center. Finished my basic training and immediately shipped out to Panama to the 210th General Hospital, where I did clerical work. And I stayed there for the remainder of my Army career. I came back to the Armory in 1946 to my old job. I was living then, when I was drafted, on Lebanon Street, which is in the Six Corners area of Springfield. And I stayed there, I stayed at the Armory until the Armory shut down, and I was transferred to Westover Air Force Base, where I retired.
And what street did you live in?
On Lebanon Street, 105 Lebanon.
And when did you move into Forest Park area?
When I was married, I moved there to my present address of 66 East Albert Street in 1956.
How old were you when you joined the military?
I was 26. I'm the old man here.
Thank you, Harry.
I'm Ben Rosenthal. I was in the sergeant in the Army in the Air Force station in England. I had experience here by taking basic training in Denver, Colorado, and the Jews in the encampment were invited to go to private homes. And I excused myself to go to the bathroom. And as I went in, they said, "Ah!" There was a fish. It was this big. And the lady was going to be making gefilte fish for the next day. That was one of my first experience with that. When I was 18 years old, I enlisted, and when I was 17, I worked in Bethlehem Steel Shipyard, and I was an instructor because I had gone to trade school, and I was as big then as I am now, not as heavy, and I used to hold the girls from behind them and show them how to blaze away.
Yeah.
And I was called to after my basic training here in the States, I went to England and did very well there in Leeds. And I ended up flying over Eindhoven, Holland, where we got shot. And it was an experience of being shot 3 times. And you can only allow 3 days to notify the commander of your post where you are. Well, luckily, the plane landed on a small airfield and went off the tarmac there and landed hitting its nose. Well, the English were protecting this base here, and they came to help us out. Well, they come with these heavy-duty hydraulics that lift your wings up, and your motor pushes you off, and you go. But around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they cut it down. Time for a tea break. We were there for an extra day. But I was there for 2 years, 3 months, and 15 days, and came home.
Home was where?
Boston. I ended up in Ephrata, Washington, and when I came home, my best friend saw my wife and says, "You better marry that guy. He can't wait any longer." So I went off to Washington and supposedly was going to go to Japan, but I didn't volunteer for that. I had another experience during the basic where I was on kitchen duty, and when I come back to my barracks, my uniform was gone. Well, I was 18 years old, and I didn't take any baloney from anybody. I went to the commanding officer, and the sergeant stops me. He says, "Where you going?" "I'm going to see the commanding officer." So you can't do that yet. The commander was in the office, heard the noise. He says, come on in. And I told him what had happened. Here I'm on active duty in the kitchen. And I come back and my uniform is gone. He says, "Well, you have some rights. You can ask for a search of all the barracks there and go and see everyone in there. But it takes a little time for that. So Sergeant, take him to the quartermaster there and pick up a new uniform." I learned from them, you got to speak up.
Mm-hmm. Now tell me, how did you come to Springfield?
Well, my in-laws lives here.
What's their names?
Gerber. My father-in-law was a dentist in Chicopee for a number of years, and my mother-in-law was a movie star, and with Morris Schwartz in the Boston area, but they lived here, and I was in between jobs. I ended up being in the furniture business, and I was a salesman for almost 25 years.
In Springfield.
In Springfield.
What company did you work for?
I worked for the Pioneer Valley Furniture, and ended up with Botero Skolnick Furniture. High grade, high class. And
Where did you live in Springfield? What address?
Heather Lane,
Where is that?
off of the 16 acres section there off Sumner and Allen Street. And we lived there for 40 years. But now we moved 7 years ago to Emerson Manor,
Long Meadow.
Long Meadow, which is a subsistence housing. Been there for 7 years, that's very good.
I had an incident when I was in Oklahoma. I wanted to go home for Passover. And I did go Friday night services, as I was at that time Orthodox. And so I went to my commanding officer and asked him if I could go home at that time, because I've never been away from, I was only 20 years old, you know, just a kid then. And he said, absolutely. So I let it go, and then we all, you know, the waves, we got together, we're talking and everything, and then one girl, this is the only time it ever happened to me. I never had a problem with me, because I was always proud to be Jewish. This one girl got so angry, she said, sure, the Jews get everything. I didn't know, you know, nobody knew what she was talking about. Evidently, she tried to go home for Easter. Well, they wouldn't let her. I'm the only Jewish person in that particular barracks. You know, Clinton was a one-horse town. It was so small. And I think maybe I was just a few Jews. I was the only girl, mostly the sailors were. And anyways, she got angry because I'm Jewish and I got the right to go. And she made a big stink, and she carried on something. I just sat there and listened, and one of the girls that was a good friend of mine, her name was Lucy, came from Louisiana, and she spoke up. Did she let her have it? She says, I never met a Jewish person until I came here, and I met Shirley. And there's nothing wrong with Shirley. She's just as good as everybody else, no matter what religion we are. And everybody clapped when she said it. That girl never talked to me after that. She hated my sight. So I kept away from her. That's the only time. Never had a problem. I was always proud of who I was. And I said, I'm Jewish, and that was it.
I just want, in the military, any recollection of being aware of being Jewish?
No, I never had any feelings about them. I had feelings about being Jewish, and then and I went to services down in Panama. We were given the right to go to one of the local synagogues. It was interesting. This was a carryover from the Sephardim. They had sand on the floors, but I went to every Friday evening. I went to services, and for the high holidays, we had a service in Cologne, in the whatchamacallit temple, the Masonic temple. And there was no, occasionally, I tell you, when you were asleep at night and it was payday and the fellas got a little drunk, they'd come up and they would make some anti-Semitic statements. But basically, I never ran into any anti-Semitism. First of all, our commanding officer was Jewish at one time. It was a hospital. There were a number of Jewish doctors, there were a number of and quite a number of Jewish personnel.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I came from a very Orthodox background, and every Jewish holiday, I would ask to be excused. I wanted to go to observe it at home, and even minor holidays, well, they're really not minor, but to me, they were all important holidays, like Sukkot, Simchas Torah. I always asked to get off, and I did get off. But the other boys there that were Jewish, they also wanted to get off. Well, I'm Jewish, I want to get off too. But they weren't religious at all. They wanted to just go out and have a good time. So the lieutenant knew about them. And most of the time, he didn't give them time off for the minor holidays. But he said, how come you get it off for every single holiday? I said, well, because the officer told me he knows that he's really religious and he observes it and he means it. So they were a little bit mad at me for getting off where they didn't get off too. But the thing is, that's because they wanted to get off just to get off. That's what it was, yeah.
I had an Irish lieutenant who was our platoon leader, and he didn't like me at all. And when we got overseas, when the Battle of the Bulge started up north, I was the first one out of the company and into the truck and went up north to the Third Army.
You think you were purposely chosen?
Oh yeah,
You were one of the chosen.
one of the chosen.
Well, maybe he didn't like you because he didn't like you. How do you know if it was because you were a Jew?
Well, he always made comments.
Remarks.
Oh, he made remarks.
Yeah,
Some of them,
GDs.
the Southerners
GDs.
especially.
What's a GD?
Goddamn.
Oh, I
Ah.
see.
GD Jew.
Yeah, so I lived right across from the Beth Israel Synagogue in Springfield. And my father was a member there for many, many years.
What street was that?
Chestnut Street.
Okay.
After Massasoit, we moved on to Chestnut Street. And he was a member there for years. And he was also a Baal Korah there. So he was well-liked there. And I just felt that that was our show. But the rabbi was there until 1933, Rabbi Silver. I don't know if you ever heard that. Have you heard that name?
Mm-hmm.
And then he moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, which is really a city which mostly Reformed Jews lived. But he was very Orthodox. He was the first real Orthodox Jew in Cincinnati ever. But he moved there. He had a bigger position in Cincinnati. That's what happened. But my mother, talking of Ferry Street, my mother was born on Ferry Street. Because people my age, most of our parents came from Europe. But she was born on Ferry Street, next to Bilski's department store. Did you ever hear of that name? Right next door. And it was this upper part of Ferry Street, going towards Chestnut Street. And she lived there. They grew up in Ferry Street. They used to do all their shopping, and there was at least 4 or 5 kosher butchers on Ferry Street, fish market, dry goods store, and 2 delicatessens, two or three Dom's was not Dom's, but Goss's was one of them. Goss's and Benny's. You've heard of Benny's, haven't you? And Schneider's. There were 3 delicatessens there, and it was a lot of Syrian people lived there too. Yeah, on Chestnut, on Ferry Street. It's a mixture of Syrian and Jewish people there at one time. They had businesses there, and so,
Muslims?
Syrian Muslims or Christians?
They originally came Christian Syrians, yeah. And they had Joseph's Tailoring Company was on the corner of Ferry and Main Street.
Coletti.
Paletti, his name was, wasn't it? You remember him, yeah. So I still
So
remember.
if we made you a map, would you be able to put the shops where they belonged?
Yes, you would. I would.
Okay,
That's
we'll
right.
work on that. That's
Okay.
it.
But
What did your mother's family do for a living when they lived on Ferry Street? Tell me again.
Yes, my grandfather was a door-to-door salesman like me. That's what I was all my life. I was door-to-door. I worked for Fuller Brush Company for 57 years.
Now, what did he do, your grandfather?
He fixed umbrellas. He went knocking on doors. He was an umbrella man. And he had a pretty good route of customers fixing umbrellas. He made a living. In those days, people used umbrellas more than they do
So
today.
you were competing with the Blooms?
With the Bloom. I was competing with the Bloom. And look how well the
Yeah,
Bloom
with
did.
Paul
didn't
Bloom's
they?
family.
Paul Bloom.
Right.
So we were. That's the kind of business we were in. If you don't mind, I want to mention one thing in my service. When I was over in Iran, I had 2 opportunities to go to Palestine. 2 of them. My aunt lived in Palestine. She came over. She lived on Massasoit Street originally. She went to because her mother, wanted to go and die in Israel, in Palestine. So when I was in Iran, I asked the commanding officer if I could possibly see my aunt. I hadn't seen her in 20 years. And he says, I told her how sick she was and she wants to see me. So he says, we're going to try to arrange it, he says. But so through the Red Cross, I was able to get 2 furloughs to Palestine. 2 furloughs. But the thing I told my aunt in the letter, be sure to be very sick that week when he's coming because they're going to check you out to see if you are really sick or you're not sick. So she was in bed the whole week because she didn't know what day he was going to come. She came, so I stayed in Palestine 2 weeks. And the thing that surprised me is the first day I arrived in Palestine was a very important day for Jewish people. And what was the important day? Germany surrendered, May 8th, 1945. So you can imagine how the Jewish people felt about that. We had V for Victory signs from Churchill on all the street corners, and there was loads and loads of people in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem celebrating that great event. And I happened to arrive there May 8th, 1945. And then I went there also in November for another 2 weeks. But what surprised me in November, I landed in Cairo, Egypt, and we took a train to Palestine, 12 hours. And it took the Jews 40 years to go from Egypt to Palestine the other way. So I made it in 12 hours. We arrived
And
there.
Moses was not your conductor.
Moses was not my conductor.
My memories of Ferry Street started when I was very young, probably 8 or 9 years old. I lived in Chicopee at that time, but we used to go shopping, or my folks used to go shopping on Ferry Street to get all the goodies. And my impression then was that there's a League of Nations, because you name the store, it says say Christian, Jewish, and anything in between. And I remember Don's Bakery and Goss's Delicatessen, where the motto was Epis Essen at Goss's Delicatessen.
Say that again?
Epis Essen at Goss's Delicatessen. That was his
motto.
trademark. And
What were some of your favorite foods as a child? Where would you get them?
we would get them from Hoya because at that time we lived in Chicopee, and I was only about a mile and a half across the river, Connecticut River, to Holyoke. And there's a number of merchants, quite a bit of Jewish population in Holyoke.
Can you remember any of the stores in Holyoke that you went to?
Could have been Wilson there, and didn't Wilson have a market there?
Wilson had one, yeah.
Did you
I
get,
can picture it right
Okay.
now.
did your parents go by car? Did you have a car?
Yes. My father was a salesman on a road, and we always had a transportation. Or we could walk. It's about a mile and a half. That's all.
Where did you go to shul?
I went to Workman's Circle Shul. My father was president of the Workman's Circle Branch 908 in Holyoke. And we used to go on Sundays, get into the car and visit the Springfield branches. And occasionally he would go down to the Hartford, Connecticut branch because he was quite involved in the Workman's Circle.
Did you speak Yiddish?
Did he?
Did you all speak Yiddish at the Workman's Circle?
I spoke a smattering of Yiddish because my father was a linguist. He spoke Yiddish, he spoke Russian, Hebrew, Polish, because he came originally from Russia. Everybody knows everybody else's language.
Okay, thank you.
In 1924, my parents moved to West Springfield from Brooklyn, from Borough Park to be exact. And he immediately enrolled me into the 10th Street Talmud Torah. And to go there, I went in the company of this girl called Clara Margolis. And she used to do the shopping for her parents. And her shopping was done on Ferry Street. And so I went there for a couple of years, in the 2 years that I went with her. Now, there was Weinberg's meat market, there was Herman's fish market, there was the Burstein fish market, there was the bakery, there were two, train
Tom's
had
a magazine.
magaziners and a big,
And Dom's.
and Dom's. Magaziners first, Dom's second.
Dom, D-O-M?
D-A-U-M.
D-U-M.
D-A-U-M.
D-A-U-M.
There was the two delicatessens, Goss, although that was Benny's, and then it was first Benny's and then Goss.
And then Schneider's. too.
And Snyder's was next door to the bake shop.
Three of them.
But Dom, Snyder's was more selling stuff than actually serving food, even though he could serve food. There was also a dry goods store run by Waldman. And there was also a restaurant, quite fancy with white tablecloths, called the Romanian.
Was it kosher?
Kosher, yes.
It was kosher then.
And there were a number of non-Jewish enterprises there, and at the corner of the street was the Springfield Hotel, where Joe Colitti's was.
Right.
And down on the other corner, I think, there was another grocery store, and then around the corner from Ferry was Widlansky's Creamery. And on the other corner was a Gentile market.
Which one?
Reuben Brothers, the wholesale dry goods.
Rubens, I think they were on Liberty Street.
No, they're on.
Ferry Street.
I know the Belskis, incidentally, isn't, what's his name's?
Wife,
Blake's.
was a daughter,
Yeah.
She was a Bilski.
And there was a fish market in Weinberg. And
And my father's
where
dairy.
was your father? Was he more toward
So he was right next door to Dom's and
Dom's
Dom's
Bakery?
What did he have there?
He had a.
Wait a second. Wait, we're finished now.
Well,
Are you finished?
pretty much so. And there was also Wallman's shop, and that was pretty much don't forget Burstein was a big butcher.
Yes.
The Burstein
What
brothers.
synagogue did you go to?
I went to, at first, when we first came to West Springfield, we went to Beth Israel, and then about 1932, my father, for some reason, we went to Kesser Israel. Now, there was Rosenberg, there was Silver, and there was Scheinkoff,
Yes.
and then at B'nai Jacob, there was Siegel.
Siegel.
Yeah.
B'nai Jacob.
Yeah.
And Price.
Hmm?
Rabbi Price.
Well, he was the Bethel up there.
Well, the Bethel was up at in Forest Park, but he just was interested in it. But basically, those were the Rosh Hashanah didn't have a rabbi, although they had a cantor, and that was the one prior to the war, just prior to the war, was Mr. Chaitovsky. And that was it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harry.
I was born on Ferry Street. I'm probably the only one here that was.
That's right.
My father had a dairy store, which he opened around 1922, and I was born in 1925. And I remember...
What was the street address of the store?
It was, I think it was 80 Ferry Street.
Uh-huh. And what were the stores on either side of the...
Well, on one side, going toward Main Street, was Dom's Bakery, and then there was Schneider's, and Goss's restaurant delicatessen was up a little further, and Benny's was up on the corner or up around the corner. But then they moved back down onto
Sherman Street.
Ferry Street a few years later. And then there was
On the other side?
I don't really remember, because I was only 4 or 5, 6, 7 years old. And my uncle had a deli in Springfield for 1 or 2 years. Then he moved back to New Haven.
On Ferry Street?
Yeah, on Ferry Street, about, maybe 5 or 6 houses further, stores further down toward Dwight Street.
Uh-huh. So all of these stores were on the ground level, and above there were apartments?
Yeah,
How tall were the buildings?
Too tall.
Oh, 4 or 5 stories tall.
That's pretty tall.
Yeah,
No elevators, right.
right, you had to walk up them.
What happened?
And I remember in 1932, just before Passover, there was this Assyrian building across the street from us. And they had an explosion. Nobody ever knew whether it was bombed or it blew up for natural causes. And I got tossed out of bed and a big cut on my foot, which I still have, the scar. And then we moved up to, my father moved his business up to Forest Park,
After that.
because that's where all the Jews were going to it,
This is 1932, you said?
1932.
Tell me what your father sold exactly in his store.
Well, we sold groceries, and then he had a butter churn in the back, and he used to make his own butter. He'd buy cream from up in Vermont from some dairy farmers, and he'd make a sour cream and a butter and cottage cheese.
Do you still remember how to do it?
He probably would.
You didn't help in the store?
No, I was only 6 years, 5, 6 years old.
Well, eventually you got older, no?
Yeah, but then by that time we had moved out of there.
Oh, I see.
And what did your father do then, when he moved from there?
Well, we had a grocery store up at the X.
But no more butter.
No more butter?
No more butter.
How was the butter served, do you remember? Or the sour cream? How would you serve it to the customer?
I think the butter we cut up into, what do you call it, and wrapped them, pound
Blocks.
blocks.
Uh-huh.
And the sour cream, I guess, in glass containers.
How much competition did you have with this dairy store?
I'd say offhand none.
We had Green's store was next.
Well,
to
that
it,
was at the X.
at the X, yeah.
Was your place kosher?
Yeah,
So a rabbi would come in and inspect? You remember this at all?
no.
Uh-huh.
And my dad used to go to a Congress Street show,
And then
I remember. And then when we moved up to the park, we went to the Kadima.
And why did you move to the park in 32?
Well, because the store was sort of we never reopened it down there.
After the explosion?
After the explosion.
That
across
affected
the-
your store too?
Oh, yeah, broke the windows and,
Oh. And you actually thought it might have been a bomb?
well, it was talked about at the time. But nobody ever proved
No,
it.
nobody ever proved it, huh?
Okay.
Why did you pick the X to move to?
Well, there was a store up there that was for sale, a grocery store, with a house attached. And my dad bought that, and we opened up there.
So lots of Jews were moving at that point
Yeah,
to
they're
Forest
all
Park.
moving to the
And why
park.
were they all moving? Wasn't the North End still a wonderful place to live?
Oh, I lived there.
Well, they used to think so.
Okay. Well, I lived on Linden Street, and as I said, the Kesser Israel, before they built the other one that Harry belonged to, my whole family ran it. It was just a family thing, and I remember as a little girl, the women were upstairs and the men were downstairs, and I used to tell my mother I'm going down to see Pa and my uncle, and I was the only one that used to go down there, and they couldn't stop me for years until I got old enough where I couldn't go anymore. But and we lived in the North End all our life. I moved from when I got married. I moved to Chicopee and was on the same street, 4th floor. We never got out of the North End. Anybody lived in the North End. I'll tell you that much. Then when World War II came, after World War II, everybody was either Forest Park or Long Meadow. That's the way it went. The Jews. And then my mother and father lived in the North End until they went in the Jewish nursing home. So I was really brought up in the North End. That's all I ever knew.
So when you said everybody went, what do you think it just meant going to a nicer neighborhood?
I think so.
Was
I
it a
think
matter
so.
of money?
Oh, money, and we certainly couldn't afford Forest Park. My father was a fruit peddler, and he was a fruit peddler, and he had a horse and wagon. We even had it in the backyard.
Up till what year?
Oh, I think he had it until the barn burnt down. Gee, I don't know. I don't know how old I was, I can't remember, but
Are
I
we talking
do.
1930s, 1940s?
Yeah, well, I was born 1924, so I
So
mean,
maybe-
we had it for a long time. We
So he
had-
sold fruit off the wagon.
He sold it off the wagon up at the Winchester Square area, and they called him the Banana Man. My father never had any, really, he came from Russia, never had any education, but he could math like that. He could add up, you don't need him, you know, in those days, people just had to learn. And then I had an uncle who was a cattle dealer, so just before Shabbos on Friday, he would bring us meat. We
Where
were
was he a cattle dealer?
all over, I guess, I don't know.
Where did he
Uncle
keep the
Jacob.
cattle? In
Oh,
Springfield?
no, out of town, they had it, but he used to go and that's what he did.
What was your father's name?
Jacob Zusman,
And your mother's name?
she was Sadie Sonia Shapiro, and her brother was Jack. He was the one that delivered our meat. We never had to worry about food, we never had to worry about clothing. My mother made everything, there were 5 girls, we were 8 in one family, and we never was hungry, never was
Where
hungry.
did they come from in Russia?
In Russia, Kiev. But my father came closer to Germany. He was on the border, Germany and Russia. And he met her in, you know, when he came over here. He was
Tell
on
us
the
about Ferry Street. What do you remember in
Oh,
terms of...
Ferry, Mama used to take us down to get ready for Shabbos. Used to get all the stuff, and every Saturday night we had to have hot dogs, you know, that was the main, that was it. I don't know about anybody else. I used to say to my mother, where does it say in the Bible that we have to have hot dogs? Friday night was chicken, right? I mean, that's the way we lived. That was it. And I used to say to her, I can't understand it. Well, you don't have to understand. You know, in those days, they never answered questions. But we used to always go
Did you
down
have the
to...
filter fish every Friday?
My mother would make, oh God, she would
Every
make
Friday?
every Friday. That and chicken, that and chicken. She was a, in fact, in World War II, my mother used to bake for them at Westover Field. I used to be a hostess before I went in the service. And we used to bring bakery. I mean, she used to bake like crazy, my mother. And, but going down to Benny's and Schneider's, I love to go to Schneider's,
What would you eat there?
Well, she would get, well, I guess we would get hot dogs and we would get corned beef. But the big thing after Schneider's at night, when Benny's would open up, when I was a teenager, the big place was to go to Benny's on Saturday night,
Good date.
where all the boys and girls were, right, Mel? I knew Milty when I was young.
Was it a place to sit and eat as well?
Yeah, we had a restaurant.
Benny's
That's
is
where
great.
you met the boys. That's where you met the Yiddish boys. I mean, you know, that's the way it was in those days. But I do remember Mama taking me to the creamery, you know, and getting the locks, and I loved it. But then all that went away after World War II. There was nothing. Bernstein's, nothing. It just like, it was
Well,
a ghost town.
and do
When we
you-
moved
do
to
you think-
Grosvenor Street, my mother moved, I got married to my husband Leonard, and I moved to Linden Street in Chicopee. The only Jewish couple there, and they were wonderful to us, you know, there were a few. But then I moved back to Springfield after 6 years, we built a home, and I've been there ever since.
So why did the neighborhood go down in 1945 after
Because
the
the
war?
people did not want to live in the North End anymore, they want to get out of the North End, the Jews are moving to Long Meadow
So is
and
this a
Forest
matter
Park.
of leaving the immigrant neighborhood?
Yeah, they left the whole, there was nobody left, we were the only ones left.
Well,
I think.
you had a period of 3 to 5 years where people went off to the army.
Yeah, and when they
Did
came
that
back.
affect the community?
Came back, yes. My uncle lived on Brookline Avenue, and after the war, it was like, what do they call it, when you all leave?
Well,
Exodus.
Exodus. And I said, we're the only Jews left. And Kesser Israel was still there. Of course, you know, my father just had to go down the stairs and go around the corner. Papa used to go every Shabbos, because after they would come home and rest, we'd all go visit the family. But I missed it. I missed it when they moved. I really missed it. Because I used to take, you know, my kids got older, we used to go visit family. We had to go to Forest Park. Never to Long Meadow, but Forest Park.
So after all these little shops disappeared,
Oh, yeah.
where did people go shopping? Did supermarkets become the place to shop?
Oh, sure, when they started that after World War II, that was yeah.
That was it.
So maybe it's
Well,
the
we still
super-
we had Chernyk's on Sumner Avenue.
For a while. yeah.
My cousin,
The Crown.
Harold Chernick, had the best butcher shop, and that was my cousin. And he had it, and we had delicatessens up here in Forest Park, we really did. But
Where?
you-
Abe's delicatessen.
Where was
Abe's
it?
was on Sumner Avenue,
Sumner Avenue.
and Harold Chernick's was
And
on
the Crown
Sumner.
Market.
The Crown Market, and then no one.
Why'd they go?
Well, he died, and they never could keep that up. The children didn't want it, and Abe, I guess Abe Semmel, he died,
He died.
and that went, and we don't have a
Kosher butcher.
kosher butcher or a kosher
Springfield.
deli.
Since when?
Crown, since
Whoa.
Crown left?
Yeah, since,
Why did Crown leave?
well, Harold passed away.
And,
Nobody could take it over.
but it moved to Hartford.
No,
so-
they have
Different
another,
Crown.
Hartford is
Different
different.
Crown?
Different Crown.
Crown, that's different. Harold Chernick
so
was
let
our
me-
license, he was my cousin, my mother's.
Let me ask you a
Yeah.
question. Did the fact that there is nobody who wants to eat kosher anymore
I don't
play
think
a
that's
big
why it
part
happened.
in closing these
No, I
stores?
don't think so. I don't think that affected anybody.
They
I
get
mean,
older and they want to retire, so
They-
Abe gave it up.
yeah.
And the children didn't take it over because
No.
they'd... You were the only one who mentioned that you took advantage of the GI Bill.
Oh, no,
I
I did
did.
too.
Okay, who else did? Did
I did.
you took advantage of the GI Bill to
Well, I
go
built my house.
With a loan.
with a loan,
Loan.
but not
But you
school?
went back to school, was that with the GI
Yeah,
Bill?
That was under the GI.
And you did that
I went
too?
to secretarial school and with the GI Bill.
Did you also go back to school?
No, I didn't.
I did all my
Studies?
schoolwork before I got in the Army.
Okay.
I graduated from Springfield Division Northeastern.
Oh.
And did you use the GI Bill for anything?
No, I didn't.
Oh, the
I
GI
should've,
Bill
but
for the house too.
You got a loan also.
Both of us were veterans.
How much did the
Why,
house?
wait a second, why would you choose not to use the GI Bill?
Well, I can't answer that. I should have, but I just
Uh-huh.
had other plans.
You were
Okay.
gonna, you asked.
How much did homes cost in those
I'll
days?
tell you what mine
10,000.
cost. Mine cost $11,000.
In what year?
I've lived there, let's see, my youngest son was 2.5, and he's 56 now. And I've been there ever since.
So about 1950s.
Yeah, we moved back to
11,000.
Springfield because we wanted the kids to go start Hebrew school and everything, going to school, but
Okay, how about your house?
Well, I lived in Chicopee in a 4-tenement house, which my dad owned.
Your dad owned the tenement house?
Yes, his cousin sold it to him.
Uh-huh.
And I was going to say, I lost my train of
When you moved to Springfield, you bought a house?
not immediately, no.
But when you did, how much did it cost you?
The house cost me $13,500.
What
And
year
that
was
was
that?
What street was that on? That one in Springfield?
In Springfield?
Yeah.
Fairway Drive.
Fairway Drive, and it cost
It's
you
still there.
13.5.
I'm still where I am.
You won't get it now for that.
No.
I'm still where I am.
How
And
about you
bought-
guys?
They bought a chicken farm.
Well, no, my father bought the chicken farm, but when we built the house, I had a GI loan to build a house. And I went to Mass State College under GI Bill.
Yes, GI.
So you're still living in the house you built?
Yeah.
Me too.
And you know what we haven't asked these people, the ones who are left, is if they had children and where did those people go?
Where did they live?
Can we go around the
Yeah.
room? So the two of you,
My daughter lives in Cambridge. She's an RN. One of my son,
wait a
My-
second, she could take, it's her children too, yes?
yeah.
Okay.
Allow him, we'll allow him.
We'll go back, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's his.
One of my
Oh,
One of my sons lives in Shelton, Connecticut. He works at Sikorsky. My other son lives at home and he works down in Connecticut.
so how many children do you have?
I have 3 now.
Do you want to comment, say anything?
That's fine. He covered it nicely.
We also like to ask if your children and their children, if they have they kept up the Jewish tradition? We were
Listen,
curious-
let's let her answer
We're
this one.
curious to see how
Well,
it
my
gets.
son that works at Sikorsky, he sent them all to the Hebrew Day School down in Bridgeport. that area. But I'm not sure about how they keep up the religion. However, the family does gather at his home for Pesach every year. And it's about 18 folks, a family.
That's one of the children.
Yeah.
No,
And the other two?
That's Nancy, she attends it. She's lives in Cambridge and she comes to attend. And my son.
But is she still observant somewhat?
No, I would say no.
And what about the other one?
Bruce, I would say not observant, although he went to Hebrew Day and she did. Yeah, they started off with the education, but they chose, well, they're Jewish. And I'm not sure. I don't think, no, they do not observe.
Okay.
I have two sons. My husband and I had two sons. And my oldest son, Stuart, lives in Austin, Texas. He's been there for 35 years. He left Boston University, graduated at the University of Texas, and that's where he made his living. He has two sons because he was not married to a Jewish woman. They did not have the education. So I'm just telling you this because it's the truth. My son is very observant. He doesn't go to shul, but he does all the holidays. Everybody comes to us, to Stuart. He's very well educated. Both he and his brother were bar mitzvah at Sinai Temple, and they graduated. And he, when my son got a divorce, the boys came to live with him. You know, they took one day weekends every year. They wanted to know about the Jewish tradition, and they keep it up. Well, they don't go to shul. My son doesn't either. But the boys come to Yom Kippur, and I never knew that. When they were 11 years old, they started to fast, and they still do it. It's amazing. I can't believe it.
What about the other son?
My other son lives in Chicopee.
Does he have children?
He has two children, but he went to shul with me. He goes with me but he's not observant.
And the children?
No, the
His
children
children?
are no, they're not Jewish. They're Catholic. But they know when it comes to holidays, they come to me. They know that they're half Jewish. In fact,
So this is very interesting. We've got, it's the same thing as in my family. Nothing's different
Yeah,
from
well,
your
they know.
families.
They're very
So you've got
proud.
two sons here who've married out, and in your case?
Anybody marry out?
No, my son is married and has 3 children.
But to a Jewish woman?
She converted.
Okay, that's Jewish.
Okay.
And your daughter?
She's not married.
Okay.
And my son's not married.
Okay.
Okay, that brings us back to this side of the table.
Okay. I have 2 children, a boy and girl, and my son has 2 sons. And my daughter has never remarried. And that's-
How were they raised? Your son, how
He's
is
a
he?
workman's circle.
Oh, the workman's circle, so there was no observant stuff. Your son is not observant.
He is not observant
Of the tradition.
Of the workman's circle.
Yeah.
I was one that
Yeah.
went to workman's circle. He had his children at Sinai Temple getting their education there. But he later dropped out. And so that I wouldn't say that they are gung-ho, but they know.
Did your son marry a Jewish woman?
Yes.
And did your daughter marry a Jewish man?
She's not married.
Not married. And that brings us to the,
Well, I have twin daughters, and I have 4 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. And I'm the only one that really is observant, I'm sorry to say, but it's just, they just got away from religion. And there's
they
nothing
married Jews?
Like,
Your
one
children?
of them married Jew. One of them married a Jewish person, and they live in Bridgeport, Connecticut. But they're not too well. The reason they're not observant, they were members of a shul in Fairfield, Connecticut, and all of a sudden, the dues went up to $1,000 for membership. And he says, "Couldn't you make an adjustment? We just can't afford it right now." He says, "No, that's the price." So they just quit the shul altogether, and now they don't go to shul at all.
And what about the other child, the twin?
That was one of the twins.
And what about the other twin?
The other twin, She married a Jewish man initially, and he died. He was a policeman in Enfield, Connecticut. He died at the age of 35. But the thing is, she remarried twice after that, and both of them are not Jewish.
Did she have children?
Yeah, she has two children, two boys, but they're not religious at all. Yeah. So I'm the only one that's left that's holding on to the religion.
You're the only one, you're the last one.
I'm the last one.
The last Mohegan.
Right.
I'd like to add something. Both my boys, I said, graduated, both made their bar mitzvahs, and they both went to graduate at school at Sinai Temple. My oldest boy never stopped being Jewish. When he was in college, if he couldn't come home and on a holiday, he'd bring everybody in to the dorm, and they would do it. And he still does it at home in Austin. He invites everybody for the holidays. Now, my younger son, when my husband passed away, we always did Passover. And I didn't know what, I said, I don't know, Brian, what we're going to do. And he says, no, I'm going to do it. And my children, they, even the kids, we say it in Hebrew and they repeat it. So I'm very pleased. They do know where they came from, and they'll never forget it. So they know they're Jewish, but however they want to live their life, that's their business. And I'm very happy with them, so I'm very lucky to have the two boys. That's it.